podcast coming your way. This is episode 375 Q&A. Stevesmi here and the Rickster. What's up, Ed?
Hey, what's up, Steve? What's up, guys? How's everybody doing out there?
Good. So, guys, we have 5 great topics ahead. Let's get into it. 4 steroid topics and then 1 very, very important topic that we're going to get into about water. Water is definitely life. So we're going to get into that topic as well. But first one, guys, low test after 2 years of stopping steroids and no PCT. Can this be fixed or not? So this is a common occurrence that we see. Guys, basically, they'll run steroids off and on, and they'll do everything right. Or they might not do everything right, or they might think they're doing everything right. But at the end of the day, even if you do hypothetically think you're doing everything right, what will happen is you'll run blood work one day and you'll get the bad news. And the bad news is you got low testosterone. You know, so we see this a lot. My old podcast host, Trevor, ran steroids really, really young. He was only 18 or 17 when he first ran steroids. Then he ran blood work when he was like 20, 21, and his testosterone levels were super low. So he talked about it on a few episodes. If you guys want to dig those up, they're long. I don't even know what number they are, but again, very, very common. I've seen this hundreds of times on the forums over the years where guys run steroids at a young age. They don't have a problem. So in that situation, what happens is your body's going through hormonal changes, and then you throw exogenous hormones at your body, shut your pituitary glands down for a period of time, and that affects the way your body matures, the way your reproductive health matures. It throws it in flux. So even if you come off of steroids and don't run steroids again, because you're interfering with your body's changing hormonals, that will still have an effect on your future testosterone levels. So I think that's one of the main problems. Now, hypothetically, let's say you run steroids later in life. You know, a lot of times what happens is, you know, you run steroids, your pituitary glands will shut down. They just don't come back. It could be from just bad luck. It could be environmental factors. It could be the water you're drinking, the foods you're eating, living next to a coal mine, living next to a nuclear power plant that's spewing crap in the air. You know, I don't know much about nuclear power, but living close to a factory, pollution, all that stuff. What we do know about testosterone levels, and this is very, very important, is if you're deficient in minerals, you will have low testosterone levels because your body needs minerals to produce testosterone. So even if you eat a lot of food, a lot of protein, you think you're getting a lot of minerals in your body, what happens is your body is not absorbing those minerals correctly. Ironically, the more you use steroids and the more you eat and the bigger you get, that's nature, the less efficient your body becomes at absorbing minerals and vitamins. Isn't that amazing? Our bodies are smart. Our bodies are adaptive. So that's what happens. So if you're a skinny vegan who just eats fruits and vegetables, you're going to absorb more minerals and vitamins than if you're a big meathead who uses a bunch of steroids, who eats a bunch of protein, who eats a bunch of meat, because you're eating so much protein and so much vitamins and so much minerals and so much iron and so much zinc that your body adapts to that and starts absorbing less. So that's the ironic thing about bodybuilding. And that's why you see bodybuilders, as they age, their testosterone levels drop. And we've seen that. And that's something I've studied for the past few years. And it's actually holds true in survival situations. Because if you ever watch a survival show, Rick, you'll notice those skinny hippie type people, they are able to survive 21 days with barely any food. But then you get a meathead, a big meathead, muscular meathead who's extremely insulin resistant. He goes on there and he has to tap out. Like by the end of the day, he taps out because he's like, I can't keep going. I need food because his body can't, his body can't handle that stress of going 5 hours without food. He's like, dead. So this is the same thing with testosterone. So this is something to look into, guys. What are you doing with your lifestyle? Are you eating too much food? Are you eating conventional foods, pesticides? You're getting a lot of this crap in your body. I actually have a friend. He works in pest control. The dude's had 3 different types of cancers. His testosterone levels are like under 100. Like everything is wrong with him because he's just being exposed to all these pesticides. So just look around your house, guys. Do you have pesticides in your house? Do you spray pesticides in your house? Do you have Clorox under your sink? Do you have these chemicals under your sink? All these things that you may not think affect your hormones, they do. So it could be so many different factors in play. So I'm gonna bring in Rick on this. I kind of went off on a tangent, but all this matters, guys. You guys really need to be careful what you're breathing in, what you're exposed to, what you're eating, what you're drinking, where you live. Even if you live next to a coal factory, it's going to affect your testosterone levels too. So all that makes a difference. It's interesting because when people die and they don't know who their relatives are and stuff, they'll actually be able to tell where these people live their lives. Like they'll be like, this person lived their lives somewhere in the upper Midwest. This person lived their lives west in the Rocky Mountains, based on the pesticides, based on the pollution that's actually in their body. Just that, so it is 100% true, guys. Even if you guys don't want to believe me on this. So I'll bring in Rick, kind of run on a tangent. Tell us a little bit about what you think on this one.
It's a long explanation, man. It's very nice. So I'm going to go to just the core of the question. You mentioned a lot of other factors, which you're absolutely right. Environmental factors, genetic factors, dietary factors can lower your test levels. Now, the question is, low test after 2 years of stopping steroids with no PCT, can this be fixed or not? Well, if you never ran a proper post-psychotherapy protocol after you stop your steroid use, there's a good chance that your body may not recover on its own. There's a good chance that unless you kind of help kickstart your testicular axis, you might not get back to normal on your own. And if you do, it might take years and years and years. Now, there's some guys, either because of age or genetic predisposition or just health, can bounce back after steroid use quite quickly without having to run a full PCT. But for most of us guys with average genetics and, just good health, we need to really run a proper PCT protocol after each and every cycle. So what can you do? Can he be fixed? Well, and we've had questions like this come up. Sometimes you have to just run PCT all over again. Run a standalone PCT. Shit, there are guys that ran good post-cycle therapies after their cycle, and still 6, 7, 12 months later, they're still low in testosterone when they go get tested. Even if their testosterone was normal to high before steroid use, they run 1 or 2 long cycles, even with proper PCT. And guess what? They'll find months and months, maybe a year later, that they're low in LH, FSH, low testosterone. And then at that point, you got to just give it another kickstart. Run a standalone PCT. Consider long-term use of some good herbal supplements. I keep telling you guys, the herbal stuff works. It's been working for men across the world before we even had modern pharmaceuticals and synthetic drugs. People have been using plants and herbs and just dietary fine-tuning to increase their libido, their vitality, their fertility, all of these signs of healthy testosterone production. So low test after 2 years of starting your steroid cycle. This guy, no PCT. Some guys really run a full PCT. They still find themselves in that predicament. Run a standalone PCT, standalone post-cycle therapy, and get on some good herbs long-term. Fedoja agrestis is the one herb that I think every steroid user should be taking along with their post-cycle therapy. Fedoja agrestis, just the science behind it is very solid. And I include a good bit, a gram of Adoja agrestis every day in my HC Generate product. Go to hcgenerate.com. That is just one herb that I think should be a staple in every steroid user's protocol for post-cycle therapy. It's an herb you can take long-term. It increases the size of your testes, increases the volume of your semen. So that's it, man. Just a very short, kind of concise answer directly to the question, since you addressed many other factors. I didn't do that.
One more thing I have to address, guys, is very, very important, because I've also seen this mistake done, is that a lot of times what people will do is they'll throw tons of drugs at their system. And what Rick is saying is very, very important, and to listen to what Rick is saying when it comes to these herbals. Because the problem I see is a lot of people will start throwing HCG, HMG, Novadex, Clomid. They'll throw tons of drugs at their system because they think, you know what, if I take throw tons of drugs in my system, that'll help me recover. And very, very few people actually do recover doing that. And they'll recover just by coincidence, because they would have recovered all along. But what happens is, when you throw these drugs at your system, you throw HCG or HMG at your system, it's actually it's going to prevent you from recovering longer, because what those do is they'll mimic hormones in your body. So they'll actually signal your pituitary glands to not produce its own hormones. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. Novadex and Clomid, they block estrogen from feedbacking into the pituitary glands. So they'll temporarily manipulate your pituitary glands to produce hormones, but they're not teaching your pituitary glands to do it on its own. So when you stop taking those SERMs, the Novadex and Clomid, your testosterone levels will tank back down. Your LH and FSH will tank back down if you are truly shut down. So essentially, you're kind of just delaying the inevitable when you do that, and you're actually making it harder for your own body to recover. So it's very important to take advantage of these herbals that Rick is talking about, the N2 Generate, N2 Generate ES, because those actually will naturally teach your pituitary glands, signal to your pituitary glands to produce hormones, but not interfere with your reproductive system recovering in the process. So I'm a big proponent of using these natural herbals instead of just throwing a bunch of drugs. And the people that I've seen, and we have blood work to confirm this, that have thrown a bunch of drugs at their system, they'll get a little bounce. And then when they stop taking these drugs, they'll just tank right back down. They'll be right back to they were before. So essentially, it's like walking around in a circle in the jungles of Colombia. You just go in a one big circle. It takes you a week to get back to the same spot you were. You're trying to get out of the jungle. You're not really getting anywhere by doing that. So it's better just to go the right direction from the start, guys. So very, very important to do that. And I'm sorry for anybody who is not able to come back. Thankfully, there is the option of lifelong TRT, and that should be a last resort, but thankfully that is an option on the table. So try to do what you can to recover, but if all else fails, give it an honest shot, especially if you're a young guy. If all else fails, TRT is a last resort.
And yeah, just to throw something in, we do so many of these podcasts that maybe some of you guys out there might think that we talk about using drugs like it's nothing. I just want to take this as an opportunity to tell you guys, we take this very seriously. And I've said it on many podcasts. I'm going to repeat it again. When you take steroids, you're messing with your endocrine system. You're messing with the machinery. There's a good chance that you could be unlucky and never recover from it. It doesn't happen that often. We see many guys that can get off the steroids and live a normal life and never use them again. But we also see some guys that have problems for years after just one cycle. You're taking it upon yourself to self-medicate with very powerful hormones that can disrupt the whole balance that your body already has working. It's a testicular axis, right? I mean, it works as a feedback loop, and you're throwing chemicals into that feedback system. And sometimes your body may just not recover. It might take years to recover. So don't take any of this lightly. You know, we have a lot of podcasts and we give suggestions and blah, blah, blah. But every once in a while, we got to kind of just take this time to remind you guys that it's not all sweet. You could have problems that could last years to a lifetime if you're unlucky enough, unfortunate enough, if you were prone to them. So it's just something to know.
All right, so next one is about tren. Can I bulk up on tren? What is the best way to bulk up on tren? So I think one of the misconceptions out there from guys, and I'm not sure exactly why anyone would think that tren isn't a good bulker, because the science behind tren is actually used today, even though it was originally pharmacy grade, human grade. Now it's used in cattle to make the cows fat before slaughter. So it makes absolutely no sense for people to actually think that you can't bulk up on tren. It doesn't make any sense to me. Having used tren, more times than I've cared to admit. I mean, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times I've used tren cycles. I've always put on mass, like within the first week or two. Like I put on like 5, 8 pounds. Boom. Strength through the roof. So tren is a great steroid to bulk, and it's going to force you to, chomp on those carbs. If you want to take tren and fast, or you want to take tren and not eat carbs, do a low carb diet, tren will punish you, because tren really does a good job of partitioning, nutrient partitioning. So you'll feel the effects. You'll feel the side effects, the insomnia, the hypoglycemic feeling, the energy, the fatigue, the lack of energy, the fatigue factor from not taking in enough carbs while you're on tren, not spreading out your food throughout the day, which is not the way you want to eat, for most of the year. But when you're on tren, it's probably a good idea to, eat a breakfast, eat some oatmeal for breakfast, eat some fruit, have some apple juice, some orange juice. You want to get your carbohydrates up. You want to spread them out a little bit, because tren will suck everything out of your body. It's kind of like taking insulin. It's kind of the same effect. And you'll notice it does affect your blood sugar. Tren is just a really strong steroid. And I talked to an IFBB pro about this, and I asked them, I was like, why does tren, cause this? And really his theory on this is because tren is so anabolic in the body. It's so anabolic that's the effect that it's going to give you. If you were to run testosterone at a moderate dosage, you're not going to get those effects. But if you run testosterone at a high dose, really, really high dose, like over a gram, maybe 2 grams, like some guys are crazy enough to do, you'll get an effect as well. And the same thing with anadrol. If you run anadrol 100 milligrams or 150 milligrams a day at high dosages, you'll get that effect. Some of these other steroids, you run so much of them, it gives a big anabolic effect in the body. But that's the whole purpose. That's how these steroids work, to prevent muscle wasting. And of course, we in the bodybuilding from this world, we don't run therapeutic dosages, which are what these steroids were designed for muscle wasting, for anemia. We don't run the therapeutic dosages. We run the bodybuilding dosages. So if you start running tren at 300, 400 milligrams a week, this effect that I'm talking about will be, higher and higher and higher. So yeah, with tren, all you got to do with tren, guys, is run it 200, 300 milligrams a week. That is by itself a strong dose. Spread out your food, spread out your carbs, have a decent breakfast, with some carbs in the morning. Even like eggs and toast would be fine. Some Ezekiel bread, some healthy grain bread, not the cheap bread. I would never recommend consuming cheap white bread. So go to Whole Foods, get some good quality bread, maybe the Ezekiel bread if you're not gluten intolerant. Get some, maybe have some jam, some good quality organic jam, sugar-free, just natural fruit jam, with some coconut milk, and you can have that. So it's really important, I think, to spread out. So when you're doing that, you're just going to bulk and you're going to get stronger on it. But that's just the science behind tren, guys. And So anyone who tells you that tren, oh, tren, you cut down on tren, you shred up on tren, it's going to put on size. It's going to put on size. And yeah, some guys do shred up on it. It's true. But the amazing thing about tren is, you eat good on it, you exercise, you lift while you're on it. You're going to, at the end of the day, you look in the mirror, you're going to look more shredded and you're going to look much bigger as well. And you're going to be way stronger. So that's the beauty of tren for sure. So you can run it by itself. You can run it with some tests. I don't like running tren with androgenic compounds personally, because it just magnifies the side effects. So I prefer to run tren with some Anavar or run it with some T-Bol, something, a mild compound with it. And that to me does the job. So I'll bring it right here. What are your thoughts on tren about bulking?
So I've said on the podcast a bunch of times, tren is that steroid that just amplifies everything else you're doing right along with it. So you can drop tren into a cutting cycle, you can drop it into a bulking cycle. And as long as you're training and eating as though you're trying to bulk or as you're trying to cut, tren will just help. Over a year ago when we started the podcast, I used to just say, don't use tren, don't use tren, don't use tren. It's not necessary for just a regular recreational user. But in the last few months, year almost, I've changed my tune a little bit on tren and said, all right, well, it is very effective. The side effects are just not worth it at the higher doses. So dropping in 100 mgs, maybe 200 milligrams a week into your cycle, it's all you need. You'll get the good benefits from it. It'll amplify everything else you're doing, will give you that drive, will give you that strength, will give you the nutrient partitioning end of it, but it won't cause some of the rougher side effects from Trenbolone, like the problems with the kidneys, like the problems with sleep, like the problems with your body heat, like problems, issues with your mentality. You've said it best, Trenbolone is the relationship killer, to quote Stevesmi. So dropping in 100 mgs, even 200 mgs on top of your cutting, on top of your bulking, great addition. And tren, really, if you want to bulk on tren, you just got to eat enough. Trenbolone reminds me of Superdrol in that regard, that if you don't eat on it, you're just not going to gain that size. You'll get the other benefits from it. You get hard, strong, but you're just not going to get that full size that you do get when you just eat enough on this stuff. So tren for bulking, fuck yeah. Not standalone, obviously, with maybe one or two other compounds. Yeah. Bulking diet, training like you're trying to gain mass. And obviously, bulking diet means getting those calories in. So yeah, tren for bulking. I mean, look, tren is good for bulking, for cutting. If you're not trying to gain or lose weight, you just want some additional strength, drive. Souls are good for that. Trenbolone is shit for your cardio endurance. So if you're trying to do some other activities like mixed martial arts, like run competitively, doing any of that stuff, it's just going to fuck your cardio up. It's going to kill your cardio. You're going to feel winded on it. So that's it, man. That's my whole spiel and tren.
Have you ever tried tren, Rick, and done cardio?
Oh, yeah. One of the times that I kind of decided tren needed to go was I got into Thai boxing big time after, doing wrestling in high school, boxed a little bit. Then I went to try jiu-jitsu. Found out that Enzo Gracie had an academy around the basement of the building that I was working at the time. I was on the 10th floor working for Elite Fitness's offices. And basically I went downstairs to check it out, to see if I could work with train at the Enzo Gracie Academy. And then I met this little Thailand guy named Master Kumran, Master K, and started Thai boxing. From then on, I went to Crewfield Nurse down by Canal Street. And I tell you what, man, in that whole run of me doing Thai boxing, I was hitting that Trenbolone, and man, did I get winded. Man, did my endurance I just couldn't keep up. There were some skinny, scrawny kind of guys that could just go for hours, and my endurance just wasn't there. I was getting shin splints. My muscles were getting cramped up, and then and there I said, all right, I need to cut back on this trend. It was like the first time that I realized trend was just doing really fucked up things to my cardio, and I stopped it. And then a couple years later, I did it again, knocked some of my hair out, and so obviously I that was the last of trend back then. And then I used tiny bit recently in my late 30s. But yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of my history, my personal history with trend.
Yeah, a lot of people, guys, I'm in my 40s, so my resting heart rate, I kid you not, I tested it yesterday, is in the high 40s, and a lot of you guys in your 20s and 30s don't even have that. So I've worked very hard on my endurance. My endurance is really, really good. And if I were to run trend right now, I credit my endurance to a lot of Bikram yoga, Bikram hot yoga. That stuff will give you amazing endurance. But if I was to run trend, my resting heart rate would go from the high 40s probably into the 70s. That's how bad trend wrecks your cardio. So it's gonna take me a while if I were to run a trend cycle to ever get back to the high 40s. And I may never go back to the high 40s because as you get older, your resting heart rate, it's gonna be harder to get your resting heart rate down, obviously. So yeah, so it's kind of it's kind of something I shy away from. I've gone full circle with this. I had my fun with trend. If I ever do decide to go back to trend, it's going to be me abandoning being strong and strong with endurance, and I would choose to be strong with how much weight I lift. So it's just a matter of your goals, guys. But if you've never experimented a trend and you're truly ready, go for it. I don't have any issues with you guys doing it. Just do it the smart way. But if if your goals are to bulk, go for it. If your goals are endurance, stay the hell away from it. All right, guys. So the next one, I'm gonna bring in Rick on this. Do you have to be rich to use steroids, and how much does it cost? So Rick, I'll bring you in on this. Interpret this question because you started using steroids a while back, and I guess you weren't rich back in the day. I could be wrong. But did it take up a lot of your budget when you first started using them?
When I started using, I was using them very young. I don't advise anybody start as young as I was, but I've been lifting weights since I was 13. So when I hit the saws, I'd already had about 7, almost 8 years of just natural training. I was a 20-year-old, broke as fuck, broke as hell 20-year-old. My parents didn't have a lot of money either. I was kind of working and paying all my own stuff by the time I was 16. So my steroid cycles were extremely expensive. This is at a time when there wasn't any underground labs at all. Everything was either veterinarian grade or human grade. And so stuff was extremely expensive back in the day when I started, when I was a young man. Nowadays, man, stuff's so cheap. Steroids are so cheap nowadays compared to what they were 20, 15, even 10 years ago. The prices I see out there are just incredibly low. Stuff is very, very cheap. Obviously, the quality has gone downhill because all these underground labs are not regulated, have no regulation, no governing body that could come and shut them down if they're not testing for heavy metals, not testing for bacteria content, using more solvents than they're necessary. There is no enforcement if they're not using the proper material for the plungers, the proper metals for the crimper. There is no governing body. These guys do whatever the fuck they want, and they tend to control the actual flow of information on the net because they've got the money. And so, of course, they're cheap. Not only are they cheap because there are all these underground labs around, but, most meatheads now can order all of the solvents and carriers and everything necessary from a website, and then order the powders, deliver right to their door, and just go to work, make a bunch of bottles, crimp them up, and put them out into the market. So you don't need to be rich to use steroids nowadays. I mean, you can get on a really nice steroid cycle if you're not doing a ton of stuff. If you're not going, doing 2 grams a week, but like if you're doing a sensible small cycle, 5 to 700 milligrams a week of a combine of 2, 3 different steroids, you could do that for around $100, 200 bucks maybe a month for running depending what you use, 5 to 1,000 milligrams of some good steroids every week. And I mean good steroids as far as the hormone themselves being effective. I don't mean clean as far as heavy metals, pollutants, toxins. I don't mean it that way. Pesticides in your oils. I don't mean any of that stuff. Those are not tested for by underground labs. Just mean good hormone, good, high quality, good strength hormones. I mean, you could run testosterone, DECA. I should say testosterone, DECA, and maybe a little bit of D-ball, $200 a month. You could run testosterone, Trenbolone, EQ, small dosing, keep it under 700 mgs per week, about $100 to $200 a month. And look, and back in the day when I got started, just a 1 amp of Sustanon or Primotestin, you were in, $17, $20, $25 if you didn't have a good hookup for a single amp. And, you wanted to use maybe 2 of those a week. You're already into the $200 realm on just doing 500 mgs of just the testosterone per week. You're already spending your $200 budget on just a couple of amps of testosterone every week back in the day when the stuff came from legitimate human grade places, and the way that it got shipped into the country was in the actual packaging from the factory, the certified factory that made it. It's a different story than it is today. So I guess that answers the question. You don't need to have a lot of money at all to use steroids nowadays, to be honest.
All right, so the next one we're going to get into, I think we covered everything on that one. Best oral to kickstart a test EQ style. Is it even necessary? So let me bring up some orals. We have Anadrol, we have Anavar, we have D-bol, Dianabol. We've got Halotestin. We got Winstrol. We have Turonabol. Those are the prime orals that guys use as orals, right? So which one of those would work? So if we've discussed these orals before. One of the reasons I think kickstarting used to be popular, and it's not maybe so much anymore, as I think back in the day, I think guys were running, I think they were running shorter cycles back in the day. I think guys now, they run 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 24 weeks, no problem. Guys blast and cruise, guys stay on year round. They'll blast, 20 weeks, then they'll cruise for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then they'll blast another 20 weeks, I think back then they kind of didn't abuse steroids the same way. And I think it has something to do with what Rick was talking about in our last segment about how much steroids cost. I think because back then people didn't make as much, so steroid users, a steroid cycle would take a lot of your budget, Nowadays, it's nothing. People are making way more money now. I mean, anyone can make money these days. You can go on and do go on one of those webcam sites, okay, and whack off for an hour, and you got people paying you money to watch you whack off. I mean, it's, you know what I'm saying? It's insane how easy it is to make money these days. So I think a lot of people, nowadays, they don't care. So they'll just run 20 weeks of a cycle. So they're like, I don't have to kickstart it. Like, who cares? They don't kickstart. They just run the world for 8 weeks. But back in the old days, they'd kickstart for like 3-4 weeks, some D-bol or some T-bol or some Anavar or some Anadrol. kickstart it for like 3-4 weeks, and then they'll run a long ester to test the EQ, long ester steroids, and then by the time they're done with the 3-4 weeks, they're done with the oral, then those other steroids will be peak in their system, and they'll run those steroids. So like week 10, week 12, then they'll come off, they'll PCT, they'll come off entirely, and then they'll run another cycle, maybe 3-4 months down the road. But it's different now. So I think that's maybe the reason people don't kickstart anymore. I don't got any issues, even if it's your first cycle, doing a little kickstart, that 3-4 week kickstart. I'd rather you kickstart within the oral than run these excessively long, quote unquote, cycles, which are not even cycles, because 20 weeks is not a cycle. If you run EQ for 20 weeks, okay, if you count the ester, which is 6 weeks to get out of your system, that means you're on steroids 6 months straight, right? 26 weeks, 20 weeks plus 6 weeks to clear the esters. So you're on steroids for 26 weeks. That's 6 months. That's not cycling. I mean, let's just call it what it is. So I'd rather you kickstart and run a 10-week cycle of test EQ, and you're good to go. And then you're going to have the people be like, oh, the haters are going to be, oh, Steve, you know what you're talking about. You shouldn't run EQ just 10 weeks. You got to run it longer. I'd rather you run it less, okay, and leave gains on the table than run it too long and then not be able to recover. Go back to our first segment and re-listen to it, because that happens. Guys can't recover. You run a 20-week cycle, which is 26 weeks. You're shut down for 6 months straight. You're going to have a hard time recovering. So hell yeah. Run a 10-week cycle, kickstart for 4 weeks with one of these orals that I mentioned. I don't got a problem with it. And you're going to recover much better than just running a long-ass 20-week cycle. Rick, what do you think?
I mean, look, it's EQ and testosterone. I've said it on the podcast many times. It's like my favorite mix. Do you really need a kickstart? Probably not. I mean, just have patience. I don't get what's all this impatience when it comes to steroid use. You're already using the steroids that are going to fast forward your results and your progress. Do you need to fast forward it more and punish your liver along the way? So my first piece of advice is don't do it. You're already running tests in EQ. Just wait until that kicks in. Enjoy the journey. However, if you were to throw something on top of it, if you absolutely had to, I would go with probably 1 or 3 steroids. If you're talking about good results, low bulking, something that you can find pretty legitimate, you won't get scammed, or the chances of getting scammed are low. Trenbolone. You already have the testosterone that aromatizes. EQ is not as bad in aromatization. Won't give you as bad estrogen side effects. More recent information, some guys even consider it to maybe work as an anti-estrogen of sorts. EQ. This is more information that I'm researching now, which if I decide that it's worth me adding to my advice, then it'll contradict some of the things that I've said about EQ in the past about estrogen activity. But I'm still researching it. I've seen some really good evidence, so I'm still looking into it. But you've got those. I wouldn't add like a D-ball or anything else that's going to make me worry about estrogen. Now, Trenbolone, you're good. Don't have to worry much about estrogen. If you're doing a little EQ testosterone cycle to get a little leaner, a little cut, Anavar or Winstrol would also help. So I would go one of those 3. If I'm bulking, getting bigger, Trenbolone. I'm not one for Dianabol and getting watery on it. I personally don't like it. Some guys do. But then if you use Dianabol with the test, chances are you're going to be into some Aromasin. While if you just take the test and the EQ and kickstart with a little bit of Trenbolone, a little bit of Anavar, maybe a little bit of Winstrol, you might not be into having to take an anti-E at that moment. So any of those can help. But to the core of the question, is it necessary? Can you do it? Yeah, of course. Is it necessary? No, just take your time. Let this shit kick in. Let it kick in. Let it do its thing when the time comes, when it's built up. The EQ is going to take longer to build up to strength than the testosterone because of the longer ester chain. It doesn't peak as quickly. And the testosterone should begin to kick in pretty quickly. So that's all I got to say about that, I guess.
All right, guys. So the last one on this Q&A, guys, is going to be how much water per day do we really need? Do we really need half a gallon? So I'm going to bring in Rick early on this one. Rick, what's your opinion on this?
Do you need a lot of water? I've seen good evidence and good arguments from experts on both sides of it. Look, if you drink a lot of water, your body will process it. If you don't drink a lot of water, your body will be very efficient at making use of the water that's in it already that you do have. We know that fasting, dry fasting, causes your body to kill some dead cells in order to get nutrition and water out of them. Your body's very efficient at knowing what to do with water. So if you drink plenty of water, your body will process it accordingly. If you don't, then your body will be very, very efficient as to what it does with the liquids. So do you need it? No. Can it help if you take that much? Yeah, why not? But we're not in this constant danger of dehydration the way you hear some people make it out to be, like you're in this constant zone of dehydration and you're constantly lacking water. I've heard these things. It's kind of not like that. One good marker that you need to just look at is look at the color of your urine. Obviously, if you're taking a multivitamin loaded, something loaded, like let's say Entugard, then you're going to notice that your pee is almost fluorescent. That's because a lot of the vitamins, minerals get processed out your kidneys. It's completely harmless. But besides that, if you have kind of cloudy, darkish urine and you're not urinating a lot, then yeah, you might need to run more water through your body. Make sure that urine is lighter. It's not as strong smelling. That's a good indicator. You know, as long as you're urinating enough throughout the day and it's kind of light colored urine, you're kind of good. You're not in this constant danger of dehydration. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
So let me get into types of water, guys, because we talked at the beginning of the show about how bad our water quality is. Did you know that our water contains herbicides and pesticides and chlorine and fluoride and all this other stuff that doesn't belong in our body? So if you use your tap water, that's what's coming out of it. So very, very important, guys, to make sure that you're filtering your water. Now, here's the good news and here's the bad news about filtering water. When you get a filter and you filter out that tap water, you're not just filtering out the bad stuff, you're filtering out the good stuff. So you're basically just getting mineral-less water, plain water with no minerals that are good for us. So this goes back to mineral deficiencies now. So you have an option. You can get a filter out the water, and you're left with dead water. Is that better than drinking tap water? Yes. Yes, it is. I'd rather you drink dead water than drink water out of your tap that's full of crap. The second thing is buying bottled water. Most bottled water out there, most bottled water is just tap water. And you can get a chlorine test kit just from like a pool supply store or Walmart or something. And you can test that tap water. And you'll see that it's got chlorine in it. Why is that? Because there's no law that prevents these companies from selling tap water in a bottle as bottled water. So people think, oh, it's bottled water. It's good water. No, most of the time it is not. It's very important to test out the water if you're buying bottled water. The third issue with that is the plastics. Bottled water, what do you think happens with all the plastics? It ends up in our environment. Plastics, again, get in our water systems and cause problems. So it's like we can't win at the end of the day. Now, there is one way you can win. That's getting an ionizer. Now, an ionizer costs some money. It's going to cost you some money. It can cost $500, cost $1,000, cost $2,000. But an ionizer you can hook up at home. It'll actually split the bad stuff out of your water, but keep the good stuff in your water. So that is a good option if you guys are really, really obsessed with water quality. The other option is you can take that filtered water, add some minerals to it. Add some potassium, add some liquid magnesium, add some salt, and then you're getting the good stuff that's being filtered out. So that's how it goes, guys. But yeah, water is a big problem. I once had a girl I was dating. She was a nurse, and she told me, she's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter what water we drink; it's all the same. It's all the same." That was her theory. So that just tells you how much ignorance there is out there and how people just don't give a shit. And as long as people like that don't give a shit, we're going to continue being exposed to crappy water, so that's just how it is. But guys, look, at the end of the day, chlorine doesn't belong in our body. Fluoride doesn't belong in our body. Fluoride is good for our teeth. I get it, but not drinking. You shouldn't be drinking fluoride. It'd be like going to the dentist and when they clean your teeth, drinking all those chemicals they're squirting in your mouth. That's not correct. Rick, finish up the show.
Your body is evolved to handle some stuff that gets into the water. Very few people across the world had completely pure, clean water. It would always carry some of the sediments and some of the minerals that were abundant in that area. There'd always be, animals that went in the water, that died in the upstream. So your body is equipped to handle some stuff, but some of it's just not equipped to handle. It's like some of these pesticides and some of these synthetics that are now in the water that weren't there before. So definitely water filtration is a good investment, is investing into good water filtration and filter your own water, reuse your own plastic bottles, reuse your own, if you can have a glass bottle that you take with you, even better, and just filter and reuse the containers. And that's it. I mean, it's a good practice. Like I said, your body's equipped to handle some contamination in the water. It's been unavoidable. Humans have settled across all this whole globe, across all this motherfucker. We've settled everywhere before we ever had water filters. And we just found a way to live with whatever water we can scoop up with our hands. Okay, didn't have to be filtered. For thousands of years, we didn't even know about boiling it. We just went with it and lived a life. That's it. Nowadays, we can boil the shit. We can filter it. So invest into a good filtration system and give yourself some nice clean water, because some of this stuff floating around our water system now, it's completely synthetic. It's completely stuff that your body was never evolved to be able to handle, like maybe some minerals and some bacteria, which is what we've always had in there, right? So that's it.
Yeah, and for people like my ex, who's a nurse, maybe someone like that, maybe so to those people, this is what I say on that. Look, at the end of the day, you're stressing out your body. If you drink tap water, fluorine, or you buy bottled water, corporate bottled water, and I can give you the brands. You want me to give the brands, Rick, or no? I can give you brands of water that are bad and good.
Let's not pick a fight with any of these fucking multi-million-dollar companies.
Yeah.
Let's leave them alone.
Yeah. But like I said, you guys can get a thing. But this is what I say to those people who think I'm full of it. Look, you're stressing out your body. You put these chemicals in your body, you're stressing out your body. Okay? Now, why would you do that? Why? Our bodies are under enough stress in modern society. We're under enough stress. We work 2 jobs. We've got wife, we got kids, we got all this stress, okay, that we're dealing with. Why add to it? So if you can limit the crap you put in your body, that's less stress on your body. That's a good thing. Because we get already too much stress. So if that makes sense to you, then listen to what we're saying. If it doesn't make sense to you, then keep drinking bottled water that's corporate owned and all this crap. So, all right, guys, that sums it up. This was episode 375. We'll talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.
Have a good one, Steve. Have a good one, guys.
the required legal disclaimer. We are only sharing our experience from years of steroid use. We are not doctors, and none of what we say should be regarded as medical advice. Always check with your doctor before taking any drugs or starting any training program.